Let's take a look at the chart. So here's a one-year chart of Nvidia. Let's actually expand this to 3 years, because remember in the beginning of this bull market, which actually started in the back half of, in the later part of 2022, Nvidia was a huge part of that. But Nvidia spends a lot of time going sideways. I'm going to draw some, here's 2024 to 2025, here's 2025 to 26, and we're just in another big trading range right here. What's the catalyst going to be for Nvidia? I don't know. I think the hyperscalers, when they came out with their earnings this year, especially Microsoft, the demand is there that I'm seeing, but there are a lot of concerns. So, Nvidia is the poster child for the picks and shovels trade, and if I'm going to be bullish on memory, I'm also going to be bullish on Nvidia, but I don't think Nvidia has the same gas in the tank that some of these other trades do.
Inez, one thing that worries me into this Nvidia report, the quarter is going to be huge. I think the outlook is going to be huge, but I do think at this point, a lot of these huge things have been factored into the stock price.
Most definitely. Look, but I wouldn't put it past Jensen Huang to come out with just a blockbuster earnings. But the question is what will happen after those earnings? Because a lot of times with Nvidia, you see that the action on the stock doesn't have the same type of momentum that you have in some of the other AI high flyers. So as Jared was pointing out, I mean, it is the bellwether for the AI trade. It is the bellwether for the financing of the AI trade as well, when we're talking about all these circular financing deals. But you see that Wall Street doesn't seem too concerned about it. I mean, we are at all-time highs right now for the markets, despite early in the week that announcement about those financial firms and Nvidia tying up.
Okay, and so Nvidia is essentially helping customers finance purchases of its own products while outside investors take much of that risk. And so what, if anything, should investors be concerned about in that model specifically?
Yeah, so NVIDIA, Goldman Sachs, KKR, Blackstone, and some of these really large finance firms signed a memorandum of understanding. And this memorandum basically says NVIDIA can create AI labs, frontier companies, and startups where instead of them having to raise money with equity, they can take out a loan for these chips, right, which then allows them to build their labs. Another big reason that they did this is, pension funds and some of these very large endowments are now able to get in the playing field versus just a private equity or venture capital firm, right? So it opens up the balance sheets of these very large corporations in ways that they couldn't necessarily have before through just private equity or venture capital.
Okay, Noah, talk to me about this a little bit. I mean, I know there's concerns that there's some, circular financing stuff going on. If we set that aside, hey, if we're just creating capital streams and ultimately in the end, there's huge, efficiency gains, maybe that risk is worth it. My question more is, does this actually increase NVIDIA's role as almost like a kingmaker in this space? We know how important they already were as sort of the key compute product. But if they now got a $500 billion, credit line to kind of choose where some of these big financing deals are going, are they truly the kingmaker of AI?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and we have to think about it in the broad picture, right? So NVIDIA has been the leading provider for GPUs and compute for, a decade and most of the AI race. And so what NVIDIA is now able to do is pick the winners and losers, right? So they're saying if this company is working on something we like or would want to see in the future, we're more likely to finance them than finance other people. So in terms of a kingmaker, they make a strong case for it, right? If you can provide the wood of the shovel itself, and then somehow find gold all in the same process, the profits for you are exponential. So it will be interesting to see if there are other competitors that can keep up with NVIDIA, but because they're so far ahead and their name brand is so strong, it's difficult to see that a company like even AMD, which is a great business, can bridge the gap, because NVIDIA's market cap is also super, super high. They have a strong credit rating, which is how they could basically do this $500 billion financing deal. So they're making a really good case.
Recently, Nvidia has been gaining traction. Since the beginning of August, shares have increased by more than 12%. Nvidia's market capitalization has returned to $5.5 trillion as a result of the move, only 4% below its peak. As people start to trust what CEO Jensen Huang has been saying, investors are buying back Nvidia stock. Huang is now bringing artificial intelligence, AI infrastructure spending closer to reality, despite some people believing his forecasts were overly optimistic. Huang stated that he anticipates at least $1 trillion in revenue from Nvidia's next-generation AI chip platform and systems to 2027 during the company's March GTC conference. Because of what he referred to as the coming of the inference inflection, he noticed twice as much demand as he did the previous year. That need is met by Nvidia's cutting-edge Blackwell and Vera Rubin chip designs. Even his earlier forecast of $500 billion in sales was difficult to comprehend. It appears impossible to forecast sales of at least $1 trillion for the upcoming year. However, Jensen Huang has shown a special ability to set the foundation for those enormous investments. On August 10th, Huang disclosed that he formed a partnership to finance AI compute infrastructure and secure over $500 billion in outside funding by bringing together the executives of 6 of the biggest international financial firms. According to Huang, processing power is starting to become a commercial asset, and Nvidia has the resources to raise the price. The agreements, which include Memoranda of Understanding, MOUs, with companies like BlackRock, KKR, and Goldman Sachs, have important ramifications. Investors should be able to see how important Nvidia is and why its stock can continue to rise based on Jensen Huang's comment below. Huang said, "Nvidia has accomplished a significant milestone. We started off manufacturing chips, but now we are contributing to the development of AI factories, a new category of investable, productive infrastructure. Compute is revenue in AI. For this position, Nvidia Compute is very well suited. To be clear, Nvidia's revenue this year is probably not going to even hit $500 billion. However, since the company's fiscal year ends in late January, it might get close. The company projects revenue of approximately $91 billion for fiscal Q2, which will be reported later this month, which is roughly 11.5% more than Q1. Nvidia will record revenue this fiscal year that is slightly under $400 billion, even if sales continue to rise by 12% per quarter. However, next year should easily reach $500 billion as the growth of AI infrastructure continues to accelerate, and $1 trillion in yearly income is realistically in sight. Currently, Nvidia shares are not trading at an irrational multiple. The stock should keep rising in tandem with earnings and sales. Riding that rise with the AI leader is still possible. The U.S. chipmaker announced last week that it had signed memorandums of understanding with the biggest asset managers on Wall Street, including Apollo Global Management, Blackstone, BlackRock, Brookfield Asset Management, Goldman Sachs, and KKR, in order to raise up to $500 billion for AI companies to borrow against. This money will be used to purchase its chips and construct the servers that power them. Using institutional funds, insurance funds, and private credit, the 6 companies will establish what Nvidia refers to as compute finance platforms. The proceeds can be used by borrowers to purchase servers, networking hardware, buildings, power supplies, and processors. Nvidia can choose to guarantee up to 25% of any particular transaction, which reduces the interest rate its clients pay, while shifting the majority of the credit risk to the lenders. According to CEO Jensen Huang, he only approached these 6 businesses, and none of them declined. The goal is to keep that expenditure off their own books, and the necessity of such a structure at all tells investors a lot about the current limitations in the AI boom. One categorization is the foundation of the financial engineering. It has long been believed that graphics processing units, GPUs, are swiftly outdated technology that is replaced by newer, faster models. In essence, Nvidia is requesting that lenders view them as long-term infrastructure that can be lent against for years, closer to a power plant or a toll road. According to Huang, these assets are now revenue-generating, productive, durable, and transportable between clients. A squeeze that has been growing throughout the year is reflected in the timing. Together, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, and other hyperscalers, whose cloud platforms house the majority of the world's AI workloads, have directed between $720 billion and $745 billion in capital expenditures in 2026, a about 77% increase from the previous year. According to Bank of America, the amount that analysts predict the hyperscalers will spend in 2027 alone has more than doubled in just 1 year, from a consensus of $480 billion in August 2025 to $1.08 trillion this month, an increase of almost 127%. At every point, the process has been repeated. The hyperscalers guided higher at the beginning of 2026, revised those amounts upward again throughout the year, then penciled in larger sums yet for next year and 2028, all while analysts who had previously deemed last year's investment unsustainable. This level of spending is reducing free cash flow and forcing tech companies to borrow more money, according to Moody's. Alphabet spent $44.9 billion on projects over a quarter that resulted in a $5.9 billion negative free cash flow. The structure of Nvidia's Wall Street acquisition lessens that burden. In addition to having Nvidia's support, debt raised through these compute financing platforms sits with the financing vehicles rather than on a hyperscaler's own accounts, protecting credit ratings and making place for traditional borrowing elsewhere. The impact is even greater for smaller operators, as firms like CoreWeave and Nebius, which pay high credit costs and lack investment-grade ratings, are able to obtain finance on terms that were previously only available to the giants. The response, which occurred weeks after a July sell-off motivated by concerns about whether AI spending will pay for itself, was more conflicted than the headline figure implies. In essence, credit investors saw something different after the news. The cost of insuring Nvidia's own debt against default increased and has nearly doubled since late May, while equity investors saw a bottleneck being removed. Their uncertainty focuses on the aforementioned reclassification. Nigel Green of the financial consultancy firm DeVere Group cautioned that lending against chips only works if the collateral retains its value because they deteriorate quickly and lose value the moment a fresh generation comes. Critics also point out that Nvidia is contributing to the financing of its own product purchases, which exacerbates the industry's already concerning circularity. David Solomon, CEO of Goldman Sachs, saw it as a turning point in a historic cycle of AI investments. Whether it turns out to be crucial in the way Solomon intends rests on an unanswered question. How much will a modern GPU be worth in 5 years?
I think you do have to differentiate between the AI market bubble versus the AI bubble. So I think that is there some degree of euphoria in the market? I think from time to time you see evidence of that, right? So and the July momentum unwind, the deleveraging has been very sharp. To some degree, that is the kind of stock market ramification you can see when you have a lot of euphoria and momentum chasing kind of behavior. I would expect from time to time we're going to have volatilities like that because of the build out, the capital financing demand is just so big. And a lot of the thesis is yet to be proven with full monetization potential. So I think from time to time, absolutely we can have that. But is the AI technology a bubble? We don't think so, because we think that actually it's just such a foundational change. We can see that it is already at even at this current early stage, we can see some benefit and productivity impact already coming through. And I think as AI take it to the next stage, when it comes to physical AI, it will have an even bigger whole economy benefit. So I think actually Asia region is very well placed to benefit from the physical AI stage, because this is the manufacturing and industrial kind of center of the global supply chain.
Julia, does the objective reality tell us that China is winning the AI race? And is this why we have to bet on the Chinese players here, everyone from CXMT to IMTC and DeepSeek, if and when they do come to market?
So I think China is a competitive player in the AI world. It has its own ecosystem. It has its own models. It has its own cloud or so-called hyperscalers. It has its own data center build-out projects. It also has its own manufacturing sort of hardware supply chain that supplies not only the China AI, but also the global AI story. So it has its own ecosystem. And on top of that, it has advantages in terms of data, in terms of power, and also in terms of a very large consumer that is just very happy to experiment with whatever is new. So it has a lot of that. So I think that makes it somewhat of a competitive AI story. That said, I think as an investor, we have to also think about investing along the part of AI that is showing incredible earning at this stage. And that for us is actually the hardware space, where China is, as I mentioned earlier, not only supplying to Chinese enterprises, they're supplying to global enterprises. And we can see that continue to have more runway as we go into physical AI. Is the other part of it also competitive? Yes. Is semi-foundry competitive? Yes, but it's very expensive, and there are better alternatives elsewhere in the global markets. Is model competitive? Yes, but it's hard to monetize. So I think there's a lot to play for, but as investors, we do want to focus on where there's visible earning growth.
Right, and let's talk about that relative value opportunity, if we can find it in this region. And let's bring in the Kospi in South Korea at this point, Julia, which is in a technical bull market. Does that tell you that the speculators, or the leverage rather, has been shaken from the tree by these restrictions and the regulators? And is it safe now for us as longer-term investors to re-enter this market?
So I think we do lean positive still in this space. And that is because we do think AI is still developing at a very fast pace. That's creating enough demand for not just Korean memories, but some of the competitors the market has been worried about. Those long-term agreements, I think, will help to protect margins as well. So we still lean positive. We think it's an essential part of the AI build-out story. The market structure, I think, has been one that's shaken a lot of people in July. And the volatility, I think, has largely subsided because most of the leverage probably been washed out. That said, because precisely as you mentioned, there's now a much sharper focus on leverage as an issue, I think that we're probably unlikely to get that really fast build out of leverage that kind of propel this index at a very rapid pace in the second quarter of this year. So from here, we do think that actually any re-rating is likely going to be driven by earning growth. And as that earning growth comes through, the market has confidence in the margin that's being maintained. We'll likely see a re-rating happening from here.
Yeah, the market will say, okay, Korea, you really need to show us the earnings growth because we got really burned, or that chart looked really scary right there. Mm-hmm. Earnings growth, pricing power, that's what markets like South Korea needs. And everyone needs that right now to really justify this AI trade. Mm-hmm. Do you see the TAM, the total addressable market, big enough, growing fast enough still to give everyone a piece of pie? The US, China, South Korea, Japan, everyone. Or are we going to be tested on that when Anthropic, for example, comes to the public market and we start to see some kind of plateauing in their growth?
Yeah, so I think, absolutely right. That's been a central kind of angst in this market. We had to take that step by step. Early in this earnings season, there was some jitteriness around, is that going to be happening, or is this, are we actually going to be putting money into something that's not monetizable, right? And then as we go along this earnings season, people start to feel more confident. And I think the sentiment did change last week. We start to see very strong demand for compute that's coming through, and the market's starting to see, oh, actually, demand is probably even faster than we think. So I think now we're in this period where sentiment's definitely warmed up a little bit more towards AI. And I think that probably can continue unless we see some policy or macro uncertainty later in the year that may derail it. But I think the story is, of itself through this earnings season has been very positive.
Yeah.